It happened. That domino did fall and fall right on the West Virginia Mountaineers and the basketball program. It's been a rough couple days, been a rough week, been a rough few years for the Mountaineers, to say the very, very least. Mike Osti, WV Sports Now, another reaction show, as we are now reacting to Darian DeVries leaving WVU to take the head coaching position at Indiana. So, not Iowa, as some may have told you all season long. That ends up not being the case. He did actually say no to Iowa, so he doesn't go back home, but does jump to a blue blood that is trying to revive themselves and match what the football program did this past year with their first year head coach. So Darian DeVries, now a Hoosier, no longer a Mountaineer. And of course, that has created a lot of reaction from Mountaineer Nation, former players, alums, fans. All of our coverage is at WV Sports Now, and that's where the coaching search is going to be, as Wren Baker is now back on the horse. Another coaching search for Wren Baker. And as much as I have said before, and I do feel that coaching searches are kind of Wren Baker's jam, I think it's like his hobby. I do think maybe he's getting a little tired of him. I don't know. I think maybe he's getting sick of the hobby a little bit. So Wren Baker is back on the grind, though. Maybe a lot of that work has already been done because, well, he did it a year ago, less than a year ago. And, maybe he's not too surprised. Cody Nesper joining me here, of course. WV Sports Now, Mountaineer Report. Find this everywhere you get your podcasts, in archive and podcast form for the audio show. And, of course, here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and you'll get notified whenever we have to react to something, which you probably already will then be aware of, or anything we do here on the YouTube channel. So before we fully unpack this, Cody, I feel like we just were at this a couple days ago, trying to unpack and react to something with the Mountaineers getting snubbed from the NCAA tournament. But what is your initial reaction to Darian DeVries leaving WVU very soon after the NCAA tournament snub to go to Indiana? Not Iowa, but Indiana.
Yeah. I feel like the Indiana stuff really came together the last couple of days. We'd been hearing Iowa for honestly a couple of months, and I don't think you or I really bought into those rumors.
No.
And obviously for good reason. He turned them down today, or
and
wasn't
why?
considered at all.
Yeah, and did you also notice? I don't know if you caught this. I myself was leading the charge. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit here. I was leading the charge that despite the Big Ten contract, Iowa did not have a good NIL and did not have a good financial situation. And did you notice right after he turned them down and then goes to Indiana, now national media members are putting out what teams paid in the NIL, and West Virginia put more to the roster, has more in the NIL than Iowa, who isn't getting it done with all the Big Ten money coming in from the TV contract. Should they be better with the money? Yes, absolutely. Would you or myself or anyone out there seemingly do better with the money than they're doing? Yes, but somehow they're effing it up, as I said. So we'll see what you want to believe moving forward. But that was clearly wrong the whole way through. And yeah, Indiana's a different story, though.
Yeah, I mean, a few weeks ago, it came out their NIL director was having to pay players out of his own pocket.
Right. I mean, what are we doing?
As soon as that
came
out,
her own pocket, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Women can be bad with money too, I guess.
Yeah, well, she took over. To be fair to her, there's a woman in there now. She took over for a lot of the money problems, so she's only been there a little bit of time. So I can't put it all on her, but I didn't want to. Yeah. So, but yes, you are correct. Yes.
As soon as that happened, that's not they're not going to poach a coach for a lateral move. We've talked about why it's a lateral move, but also a coach isn't going to look at that and say, "You have no NIL money. How am I supposed to build a roster?"
Yeah, who cares where it is? I get it's home, but I'm not just going to suck because I just happen to want to be there. I mean, you might wish the situation was better, but it was not.
So that's I never bought into Iowa, but the Indiana stuff, I feel like the rumors about Indiana didn't really start until yesterday. Really, I mean, I feel like there wasn't even really stuff on Sunday night, but yesterday I heard one thing, and then this morning it was all of a sudden it was a done deal, and I guess they must have met yesterday or today and worked it all out.
You mean when he was rumored to be in Iowa, by the way, if you believe the internet? Because apparently he was in Iowa yesterday. Obviously that was wrong.
Um,
again.
but no, I I'm surprised he left because I didn't think he was gone, but I'm not surprised he would pick Indiana over West
Yeah,
Virginia.
yeah.
I guess I'm surprised that Indiana swooped in and kind of did this so quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, it was almost unsettling how quick it was because after the national media kind of confirmed the reports, 10 minutes later, Indiana has the official announcement ready with a press release and DeVries' quotes. And he wasn't in Iowa, but clearly was talking to Indiana. And my first reaction to this was yes, I'm not surprised that you would take a job like that. I would have been surprised. I think Iowa would have been a bad lateral move, not only for him professionally, it would have looked bad for WU. And I didn't think Iowa could get it done, and they didn't get it done and he turned them down, which Pete Thamel even confirmed on McAfee's show earlier because McAfee was even asking, well, why wouldn't they want my coach? He's such a great coach. And Thamel was like, no, they were interested. It didn't happen. You read between the lines there, and then here's the money, and it wasn't even to WVU's level. But Indiana's a different story. I mean, people can bring up that Indiana, and this is actually true, Cody. It may surprise some casual fans. People can bring up that West Virginia basketball has been wildly more successful than Indiana basketball this century. If you're talking about just this century, from 2000 to 2025, WVU basketball has been better. It has, whether it be Beeline, Huggins, or even now. And they have the same situation of, the last tournament appearance a couple of years ago, last week 2016. It's been longer for the Final Four for them. They had more years where they missed. WVU's been better. But Indiana is a real, I'm going to steal a phrase from Fran Fraschilla, who keeps talking about West Virginia in this way. Indiana is a real sleeping giant. I
Mhm.
mean, if the football program, who had 3 bowl wins in 150 years, can go to the playoff in year one off hiring a new coach because money came in, imagine what they would do for the program they really care about. Because I'm sorry, Kirk Zanetti, maybe you're the loser in all this. When all this money floods in, it's going to go to DeVries. They won a basketball national championship more than they won a football one. That's just a fact. It is a
Oh yeah,
basketball hotbed. It is a basketball school. So if you're DeVries, even though West Virginia basketball is an historic brand, is a quality brand, and you could argue even has a better history than their football program, it's always going to be a football school number one. Indiana is a basketball school. So if you're DeVries, you have the NIL commitment, you have the Big Ten contract. They have not been messing up money. You know what Signetti just did there at the same school. You have the pedigree of history, even though it's been a while. And now there's a real hunger for investment and more money coming in than even was there in the previous era. And it's a basketball school and so much interest there with the
yeah.
fans that are now going to be energized on what you just did. I'm not surprised he took the job. I do think it's a little unsettling how quick it moved. And my other reaction was West Virginia not making the tournament and getting snubbed is also partly why this happened, because part of what I was hearing from Indiana people, because just covering the combine a couple of times, I actually do have some friends who do cover the Hoosiers. They were saying that DeVries is definitely a candidate and a guy they wanted, but Indiana wanted to move quick on this. So if West Virginia is preparing for the NCAA tournament right now, are they hiring him? It doesn't mean they don't like him, but there were other candidates around. They maybe just wanted to do this now, and DeVries became available because of the snub. That maybe is how this quickly moved from Iowa, no, it's ridiculous, to Indiana within 24 hours, really, from the snub and how it feels. And clearly, it also feels like DeVries was talking to Indiana maybe in the midst of releasing a statement about the West Virginia snub. Like, this does feel like this moved at an unsettling pace. And then, of course, Tucker coming with him. That's his son. We all knew that would happen. He'd go wherever his father was. But this does call into question how this past season was handled. I'm not saying anyone faked an injury, but you don't talk about your son's injury and then you end up bolting and you take your son with you after 1 year. Not a good look, I would say, at the very, very least here. But yeah, I don't think this. Where are you on how this now creates a new perception of the West Virginia program? Because obviously that's always the conversation.
Yeah.
You do have a coach leave after 1 year. That's not normally a good look, but it is to a blue blood. He didn't do the lateral thing to Iowa. I don't think this really hurts the brand name as much as some fans are trying to make this out to be. But again, it's not good to lose a coach after 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting you brought up kind of Darren's going to be flush with money. I was just kind of skimming to see what Indiana people thought. It doesn't look like Indiana fans, by and large, are really energized about this. Like a lot of them were saying, like, it's a fine hire, and like giving it B grades and stuff.
They're a little bit
Which
of an
I've,
unreasonable crowd there, by
but
the
I was
way.
gonna say,
They're living in the
I don't,
70s and 80s.
I don't know who they thought they were gonna get. That's better than
Yeah.
Darren right now. I mean,
No. They poached a
certainly if they,
Power 4 coach, right, who had
yeah.
tournament appearances.
So that's where I'm interested. Like, if the fan base, and obviously people online don't speak for the whole fan base, but if the fan base is a
Yeah.
little lukewarm on it, are the big donors gonna jump in right away? But he's
Well,
gonna
that's
have money. They
that's
have
a
a bunch
fair
of money.
thing, but I guess what I'm saying, part of Darren not being able to turn down the job is he was promised an NIL
Yeah,
commitment that West
yeah,
Virginia
yeah,
could not match. So, maybe there's not an energizing of the fan base, and maybe but I'm sure they would not have offered him something unless they knew the big donors were going to be into it. So
yeah.
what the
Yeah,
fans
that's
want, and the fans are unreasonable there, but if he starts winning and makes a tournament or two and then goes far in the tournament, which they haven't done in a while, that's a whole different story. I think sure they then will get behind it. But
yeah,
that fan base
yeah.
is a bit, I mean, a bit crazy. I mean, I had an argument earlier in the day with people talking about how the last time Indiana basketball popped was 40 years ago, which is, older than both of us for sure. And I was like, just so you're aware, they have greatly underachieved with that brand, but they were in a Final Four way more recent than 40 years ago. They were in the championship game way more recent than 40 years ago. They were in a Sweet 16 within this past decade and in the tournament just a couple years ago. People talk about Indiana nationally as if the brand has been trash for 40
Mhm.
years. They've not been what they were with Bob Knight, but I could see being a quality coach thinking, I'm going to grind it. I'm going to make you invest because there's interest here and it can be a sleeping giant. You can turn that
Yeah,
around right away and then immediately, and you're going to get bumps. I mean, if it's West Virginia and Indiana looking for the tournament appearance, obviously Indiana would get in. DeVries is now on the other side of that blue blood coin in terms of with the committee. So, yeah, maybe there's some unreasonable fans, but I'd imagine the commitment would not have been offered to him unless they can uphold it.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I feel
yeah,
like, and then in terms of how WU kind of comes out of this, certainly it's a better look than if he had jumped to Iowa. Like that would have been
yeah,
horrific.
yeah,
So certainly, for him to go to a premier spot, I don't think that hurts WU too much. Obviously, if there had been this interest and they would have been able to give him an extension, I think that would have made WU look extremely good. Um,
yeah. They
um,
tried. I know
they
that. I know
tried.
they wanted to. I mean, Ren even confirmed it. I just think they were really underestimating the commitment that Indiana can put in financially
Yeah,
now.
so I think, well, I think we're gonna see. I don't think any of the numbers floating out right now are what he's gonna get. I don't think he's gonna be a top 10
Right.
paid coach in the country. I do think it's gonna be substantially more than the 2.8 WU was paying him this year.
Right.
Um, but I don't think like it's a reset. Like losing a coach in the portal era, it's a hard reset. And so go ahead, like any of the returning players, any of the recruits, just chalk them up to being gone. And if they end up back here, it's just gravy. Um, but I don't think West Virginia is in a terrible spot right now today because you lose a coach in the first year, you get a pretty penny in his buyout. ESPN has his buyout at over 6 million, and that's 4.7 ish of that is his contract, and then there's some on top of that because Indiana has to pay his Drake contract or buyout actually, and then they have to recoup WVU's like the search committee cost and those kind of costs that come with doing a search. So WU
Right.
gets about 6 million. I believe some of that goes to Drake, but WU gets a good chunk of change. And as we've seen, they're way better than Iowa right now. So it's the best job open right now. It doesn't seem like there's going to be better jobs opening up. Just looking at the landscape. So, and we were kind of talking about this during the football coaching cycle. Is like it seems like Ren's kind of going to have his pick, and it seems like there's more intriguing candidates than there were during the football cycle. More directions to
Yeah,
go, at least.
right. I mean, it's hard to say there would be as many intriguing candidates as there were the last time Wren was searching for this particular job, because when Darian DeVries was hired, you had Dusty May. I mean, that
Yeah.
was a real big off season of basketball jobs being open, major coaches being available, and it was a changing of the guard a little bit on how that was conducted, because all the major jobs hired mid-major coaches and just promoted them, and it wasn't as much of a plucking as now. Obviously, Indiana is doing something different, as they are stealing another power program's head coach, even though he's only 1 year removed from being at a mid-major. And also, the other end of this too, as much as it's a job you can't refuse, and money, brand, all that, basketball school over football school, there's a chance Darren DeVries may regret this in the future, because West Virginia was not going to fire him. They were going to consider this like a tournament appearance. Ren Baker was going to be committed to him for probably 3, 4. He would have gave him an extension, even though it couldn't match Indiana. I do think if he turned on Indiana, he was going to get a mammoth extension. And I think Ren is a very loyal and committed guy. He would have allowed this man to rebuild, maybe even miss a tournament again, and still not fire him. I mean, he kind of let Neil Brown do that type of thing. So that's not going to go down in Indiana. That's not going to go down in Indiana. I mean, they just saw what Cignetti did, even though it's football. They know it's been a while since their last Final Four in 2002, which is longer ago than even WVU. That, again, people are missing the last 20 years comparing the history. They know the pressure there. They know it's a basketball school. They're going to invest. You imagine the donors are going to step up to the plate again, because many of them have wanted a coaching change for a while, and they got a grinder. It's obviously a great hire for them based on what they could do in this cycle. But I don't think a tournament snub, even though maybe you should get in, is going to work as well with Indiana basketball as it maybe would at West Virginia. Certainly not more than 1 year of doing that. And if you recall, at Drake, he would get in, but he wouldn't win in March. They're going to need him to win in March. So he could get fired there within 2 years if he doesn't quickly do kind of what he just did at West Virginia and turn that around. But that's another reason why I'm already seeing here in the chat, and it's obviously going to be hard to fully go to the chat here because this is reaction to major news, but seeing a lot of this sets us back for years now. Some of the new commitments have already released that they're, where they're going next year. We do have on the site that a couple decommitted in terms of recruits, that type of commentary. A lot of this same stuff was said before DeVries was hired. A lot of people are saying the same type of stuff, that, worst season in program history. You were forced into an interim with a coach who wasn't ready because of the Huggins scandal. No one's, really going to want this because of all the drama. They end up with one of the better coaches of that hiring cycle, really probably number 2 to Dusty May. And right away, they get a season that really should have qualified for the tournament. They get major big wins. They conquer adversity. They have a season in which he was Big 12 Coach of the Year candidate most of the year. And same thing with Small as a Big 12 Player of the Year candidate most of the year. And the energy was back, and the recruiting was back, and the brand seemingly was back. And that might go away a little bit now for a while until they hire a new guy. But Darren DeVries just proved that you can turn it around in a blink of an eye. Kirk Cignetti going back to Indiana, he proved you can turn around a bad program for 100 years around in a blink of an eye. The portal can suck, but it also can benefit you right away. So this can go either way. And also, Cody, clearly Darren DeVries is a guy who just wants the best job. He's not necessarily going to be locked in anywhere. So maybe it is better now than to have him another year. You lose out on coaches again. And then, maybe you'd have Tucker, but who knows? Like, just get this over with and maybe lock into a coach. And as you're saying, unless somehow Pitt turns around and fires Jeff Capel, which I don't see happening, and I still would argue the West Virginia job is better than the Pitt basketball job, there's really no other similar job open. And it's clear based on the coaching market that West Virginia is viewed as a better job than Iowa. The guy that just left you turned them down. So imagine you could argue the biggest loser in all of this is Iowa. Like, how do they look right now? They're in the same conference with Indiana. Their rival gets the coach that they clearly wanted. Their media, and that includes some fake media, but even some legit media, they look foolish right now because there were some legit reports that they were negotiating with the man. If you were, I don't think he was aware of the negotiation, or you eventually got turned down, because what might have happened, Cody, is he said, okay, what do you got for me? It's going home. What do you got for me? And they were like, a lot less than you'd be getting now. We're making no commitment. Yeah, there's a lot of TV money, though. If we get better with money, maybe we could do something. And he might have laughed in their face. And that's kind of what happened. And now they got egg in their face. And I don't know how they can sit there and tell their fans they're going to hire a better coach than even West Virginia's going to hire. Because he pretty much just told them, I'd rather be at WVU than Iowa, but I'd rather be at Indiana than WVU. Okay, that's not as much of a stain, I think, on West Virginia. So, West Virginia's never going to be the North Carolinas. They're going to be viewed as that. We just saw that by the committee. They're never going to be Indiana vying for coaches despite a better last 20 years. But they're still a top 25 program overall in basketball in a brand sense with the rest of them, which is what Ren always preaches. I think that still is the case. This will be a big deal, though. And that then moves us into where we got to go and where this is going to go. And that is, what do you do if you're the Mountaineers? Before we get to names, which, we already have an article that we'll release on the site tomorrow. And of course, a live show here on Tuesday night as March Madness is about to begin. The madness that has been around West Virginia basketball has continued this week with the tournament snub and now DeVries leaving. But does this at all change any of your mindset about what type of coach they look for? Because I've been a big proponent of you can't just focus in on West Virginia ties, and Ren Baker has publicly said he's not going to do that. He doesn't have ties himself. He did hire a ties guy with Rich Rod, bringing him back, but everybody else, including DeVries, was not connected, had no state or university ties before getting hired. He did hit a home run with Mark Kellogg, who looks like he loves being there, and he had no ties. Does DeVries leaving after 1 year when you really hit a home run with a coach, but then he leaves, change your mind at all about how Ren Baker should proceed here? Because I will admit the number one thing he needs to achieve is not doing this again next year. He cannot be doing a coaching search every year, no matter what. And they did not just make the tournament, even though they should have. So he does miss again and then also loses a coach. That does look bad.
Yeah. No, it's I just don't think if you want to compete at the highest level, I just don't think you can handicap yourself like that and say it has to be a guy that's from the state or is connected to the university or something like that, just because it shrinks the pool so much, right? Like if we took that mindset into this coaching search, you're looking at Jared Calhoun, who I actually really like, and I really liked him last year too. And I don't remember his first. Spiker at Drexel, he's a Morgantown guy. Right, so like those are the two guys off the top of my head.
Darius Nichols. I mean, he went to LaSalle now.
You
got to bring him up because he's actually petitioning for the job now, and he was having a solid run where he was. But I mean, going to LaSalle almost hurts his value. I almost wonder why that's where he's going. But
we don't. LaSalle's not that. We don't have to talk about it.
I just think he should be stepping up. Right, that's like a lateral move to what he was doing. You almost you don't need to be doing lateral moves when you're at that level, I guess is my thing.
So I think you just can't handicap yourself like that. What Ren needs to do, and he kind of didn't learn his lesson when Don P left, is he has to increase these buyouts. Because Plitzwight's buyout was so low, they got almost nothing from Minnesota. Right. And then I don't know if you remember, Kellogg's buyout is like half of his contract. It's like 50%, which is a massive buyout.
Maybe that's part of why Kellogg loves being around so much.
And Darren's buyout was it 37?
37 and a half, I think, something like that. Yeah,
which isn't huge. It ends up being 4-point-something million, which is a good chunk of change, but that's not prohibitive for a program like Indiana, which
Right. See, that's what I was kind of wondering. And you were at those pressers too. And maybe I'm remembering more of the football thing because I know Rod's buyout more of it would kind of really screw him. It's a little different of a scenario. And obviously Neil's last one, it came down to make it easier to fire him. But didn't Ren Baker kind of brag that I won't get us into this mess again because I'm going to make the buyout like impossible to get out of when I do hire the basketball coach? And then he didn't do that. So Ren Baker's not somebody who says something and then doesn't do it. He's not, anyone's lapdog or bitch, but it almost looks like it almost looks like DeVries' agent played him a little bit. It looks like he lost this. It really does. Because yes, you can't control a coach going to a blue blood, but if this buyout was like Kellogg's, maybe they then would think again because they had other options than just DeVries. He did not make the buyout impossible to get out of for anybody in the country. And I swear in my brain, I remember him saying something like that was his plan.
Yeah. So if my memory's right, which I hope it is, I'm not that old. I remember him talking a lot more about it during Mark Kellogg's introductory press conference.
Okay.
Um,
I'm older than you, so maybe my memory's worse. But I mean,
it's kind of the double-edged sword where DeVries didn't get a massive contract from WVU. 5 years, 15 million isn't
true.
humongous.
Some were surprised he picked West Virginia. Some were surprised at the time.
So it's like, if it had been 5 years, 20 million at 37%, that's a good bit more money, right? So the buyout would be much larger. I just think, in retrospect, you don't hire a guy expecting an Indiana or one of these money-rich programs to poach him.
I
Obviously,
feel like Brent got that spreadsheet of jobs that are about to come open, though. I think he wouldn't have been. He couldn't have been that surprised this job coming open.
So it's just like, obviously it was prohibitive for Iowa, right? So I just think it's
right. That's true.
You either got to give him more money, or so the buyouts, bigger percentage wise, or you got to increase the buyout percent, which would increase the money if you wanted to fire him, or right. So it is that double-edged sword. It feels like Red missed the sweet spot on this contract.
Right.
Just because if you're gonna lose him after 1 year, which obviously you don't sign a 5-year contract thinking you're gonna lose him, but if you do, you want to get a bunch out of it, and they they didn't get a ton. They got a good amount. They got a really good amount. 4 point whatever. That's going to let them basically hire whoever they want. Assuming it's going to be sort of a mid-major promotion type deal. I doubt they're going to go poaching from a lateral standpoint.
You could argue that the situation they're in now to hire a coach is better than they were when they were hiring DeVries, because they were coming out of the worst season in program history. They're coming out of the Albert Huggins mess. I guarantee you, I think we both know Ren well enough. At the press conference, whenever he talks about this, before or after the news of who he's going to hire, I guarantee he says that we just proved the fact that you can turn this around and win big in 1 year. I guarantee he says that. So he's good. If he's saying it to us, he's going to say to another coach, look, I know we were snubbed, but we just won 19 games after winning 9. If DeVries can do it and you think you're better than DeVries, come aboard. You win 20, we're in. Like, he's going to be able. I think his sales pitch is stronger than it even was a year ago. You don't have to resurrect out of drama as much as you had to before, but it still sucks to be doing a search again, but I think the sales pitch is stronger. So that's why this is funny, Cody. As much as the fans are down, and I fully get the fans being down, and I'm annoyed too covering this, by the way. I'm annoyed doing this again. Messing up my spring. But as much as everyone's annoyed and down, as I said to somebody earlier, and it just rings true. Separate from what we can all argue about the brand, whether it be Ren Baker media or fans, when you have national media members who have no connection to WVU, have no reason why to put lipstick on a pig at all, giving you a complete, just matter of fact, no, they're going to be fine. They're going to get it done in a couple of weeks. No big deal.
Yeah.
That tells me that they also think the brand is okay. They also think the sales pitch is okay. They understand the situation. I mean, if Pete Thamel and, Goodman and, anyone you want to name was out there saying West Virginia was just toast, that would be different. They are saying about some programs within the same hour. They're saying Iowa does not know how to handle a dollar, and they're effed. But with 10 minutes later, they're saying West Virginia is going to be fine. If they weren't going to be fine, they would tell you. They're not going to just say WVU is cool if they're not. So I get being down, but the national media is corroborating what people like myself who cover the program every day are saying, and there's no incentive to just lie. I mean, I just don't. So again, I think Ren does have a better sales pitch than he would have, but he certainly doesn't want to have to do this every year. I don't like the ties thing either, but you cannot do this every year. So that is a concern. If it's not a Calhoun, if it's somebody that is just, even if you do pluck somebody, if you pluck a solid coach because now you have the ability, You just can't do this every year. You
Yeah.
cannot do this every year.
Yeah, and we can talk. There are some when we get into kind of candidates. There are some like more interesting ties wise guys than there were last year.
Yeah, that's
But
true as well.
real quick, I want to say, I think an underrated part of this is like you were saying, Mike. The program's in a much better spot this year than last year. And I think an
Mhm.
aspect people aren't going to think about is, Huggins had been here for what 18 years. And then
Mhm.
your first season without him is maybe the worst season ever. And then Darren comes
Right.
in and does that. It shows like anybody can do it, right? Like it's not it's kind of the opposite of Syracuse, where have they been great since Boeheim left, right? And so you're kind of like, was it all Boeheim? Can Syracuse get back to that? I think what Darren showed this year is like it wasn't all Huggins. With the right coach doing it the right way, anybody could come here and have success. And I think agents, coaches see stuff like that, and
Well, I
right, and they
also
see
think,
and
yeah,
they see a fan base that's going to be supportive, in that
right.
was going to be patient for a year, right? And as opposed to an Indiana or Syracuse,
Yeah.
I think has more pressure than West Virginia, certainly. So it's I think because of that year, there's no shadow over this job. There's no doubt with this job. It's like, yeah, you can come here and get paid a good amount of money and have a whole bunch of support, and you can win.
Yeah, and again, not only did DeVries prove it, but I think a weird advantage of the West Virginia program in comparison to, say, Syracuse, while everyone's thinking in their brain, oh, longtime coaches, you're replacing a Hall of Famer, it's very hard to do so, and that's all very, very true. But immediately what popped into my mind while you were going on there is Syracuse has literally no way of saying anybody but Boeheim has won here. Now, Boeheim has
Yeah.
won really, really big, but they have no way of being able to prove that on the basketball side. West Virginia can say, sure, Huggins is a legend. We wish it would have ended better, but he's a legend we'd like to celebrate. But prior to him, John Beilein, who also is going to be in the Hall of Fame, he also is a Hall of Fame coach, also had an Elite Eight appearance. Prior to him, Catlett had his roller coaster ride, but he did have a Sweet 16 a few years prior to that. Like, West Virginia has had a history of a myriad of coaches over decades upon decades of success. There have been down times, but there also have been enough good times spread out. So you'd rather have, maybe not have to do this and have a Boeheim run for 30 plus years in some respects, but in other respects, Ren Baker can also go in the room to anybody who does not really know the program and says, well, I'm a great coach, but I'm concerned it was just Huggins. Ren can
Hmm.
say that's just not factually accurate in any capacity at all. Like, here is 18 spreadsheets and a lot of Google searching. Feel free to check it. That's just not true. There was success before Huggins. There's been now success after Huggins because it's DeVries, where that would not have been able to be said with Eilert. And you can have success if your name is not Bob Huggins. It seems like the fan base thinks only Bob Huggins can have success. That is just not the case. And there's even success without it being John Beilein or Bob Huggins. And Beilein, by the way, is now 1 year older. So this is even less likely. And I will tell you, him and Ren did talk last search. There was a consideration of him as a bridge gap for like 1 year and then be a placeholder. I think Ren would have done that. At that time, Beilein wanted more of a commitment than just this placeholder 1 year thing. And Ren didn't want to do that then. Maybe he would now, but I'd imagine that Ren's going to be like, oh, now you're 1 year older and you want more years again. I can't, I think that's even less likely than it would have been a year ago when they were coming off drama. But I do think this is a better job to sell. And I do think that kind of what you were saying too, that while West Virginia got 19 wins and should have made the tournament and they didn't get in, and that's disappointing, and the way it ended is disappointing, the 19 win season and the big wins is better than anyone really projected this team to
Yeah.
do going into the year. So they overachieved expectations in year one of a new coach. Somebody else can do that as well. And by the way, to answer Huggins, this is not going to be Huggins. Huggins is not on any radar or being considered as of now, from what I'm hearing. The only thing I will throw out there as a caution before I guarantee is many would have said the same thing about Rich Rod and obviously ended up being hired. And this is a couple years removed now, so Huggins is not as much of a problem around. It's not as much drama. But I think people need to remember it was not just, oh, he made a bad comment. up the DUI, then he got fired. I can pretty much tell you he also lied about the situation with the university. He lied about whether his signature was on the document. He lied about whether he was, he said that he didn't resign, and of course he was forced out, but the program was trying to have him save face, and then he lied to smear that and try to cover his own self. I mean, he literally basically accused Ren Baker of holding a press conference without a signature on a document, which would have been insane, and that was a lie. So this is different to me than Rich Rod, Cody. I don't know what your thoughts here are, and we obviously both covered it, but people need to remember this. Bringing back Rich Rod was different for Ren Baker. He wasn't there in 2007. Rich Rod did not shred documents or lie about Ren Baker. Bob Huggins was right with Ren Baker. Like what Bob Huggins did impacted Ren Baker early in Ren Baker's tenure directly. He's not going to disrespect his legacy, but that's a lot different than just hearing rumors of, oh, this guy was a jerk 20 years ago when I wasn't there. I would be well more surprised if Ren Baker would tuck his tail between his legs. And I will tell you now, Huggins is off the board for me, and we're not putting him on the board. I'm saying this now. We're not putting him on the board at WV Sports now unless there is legit reporting on it. Legit reporting. He's not getting on the board until that time. If you get legit reporting, then he'll go on the board. But if they end up hiring Huggins right now, I do think that then would reflect poorly on the program.
Yeah.
More so than the Rich Rod thing, because everything we're saying about the brand, that would look like they have no better options. And what we're saying about the brand and what Ren has said publicly is then not true, and that Pete Thamel is wrong and all of that, and that they are just have no better options and got to just tuck the tail between their legs, and Huggins making them look like fools doesn't matter to them. They can't do that to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you used the exact analogy I was going to make, just tucking your tail between your legs. And it would be a really like cowardly move. just a total give up. Like,
Can't do it.
This guy sued us. This guy embarrassed us. This guy, through no fault of our own, ruined the end of his career. Right. But now we're going to bring him back because we can't do anything else. Yeah. So no, I mean, it's not going to be Huggins. Like, it's just so many things would have to go wrong for Bob Huggins to.
So much would have to go wrong that the program would be in dire straits, and that what Pete Thamel, myself, and others are saying would be completely wrong. And
it's utter desperation.
That would be utter desperation. That would be doomsday. And if that happens, you might get some recruits because he's a Hall of Fame coach, but that would just look so horrible. So apologies to Eric Stevenson and Emmett Matthews who already have said it. That just cannot be happening. And I don't think it is going to happen. Ren Baker is not going to do that. That is not a Ren Baker, let's move on, have my guy in. It's one thing with Rich Rod. I don't think he does it with Huggins. If I had to bet you, and I don't think either one of them are viable options at all, but Beeline has a better chance than Huggins. If we're talking about one of the two of them. Yeah. And Beeline's too freaking old at this point. But and Huggins' perception, by the way, of recruiting is better than Beeline's. But no. I mean, that can't happen. So then, Cody, and we can tease, I guess, we can reveal what's going to be, we're going to release tomorrow anyway. People are already talking about it, and some people already know some of the names. So who are, your names that legitimately are on our board right now? Do you think are legit viable options that you could see the program hiring and that you do think would make sense for the program to hire?
Yeah. So immediately, two names shoot to the top of the list. Ben McCollum, who's at Drake right now, and Jared Calhoun. And they're both really, really interesting, and I think would both be pretty good hires. Starting with Calhoun, I'm sure everybody remembers he's a former Huggins assistant. Yep. He was here for a while, went to Fairmont State, then went to Youngstown State, won both places. He went to Utah State this season. He has them in the tournament. So he obviously, has that connection here. He is a Huggins guy. I don't know if that turns, anybody in the administration off, but
that's true.
And like I said, I liked him in last year's cycle. I think going to Utah State and getting into the tournament only helps him. I like him a lot more now. McCollum, he didn't get talked about a lot last year. He was in Division II last year. He has an insane Division II record if you want to look it up. He ironically replaced Darian at Drake. He could maybe do it again here, and it's a fun connection. He was with Ren Baker at Northwest Missouri State, the same Northwest Missouri State Mark Kellogg was with Ren Baker at. So that would be an ironic twist that both basketball teams, you lose a coach after 1 year and then go get a Northwest Missouri State connection.
Right.
But McCollum's been a really, really hot name this cycle. Obviously this cycle is only a couple days old. Drake went 30-3 this year. They're in the tournament. They are an extremely popular upset pick in the first round.
It's weird to do Drake coach again, though. Back-to-back Drake coaches is just weird. I mean, other than that, I don't have any reason to hate the man, but that's just odd.
Yeah. So it's yeah. And then the third guy that Fran Fraschilla brought up, sort of unprompted, was Will Wade.
Fran Fraschilla, yeah, maybe Fran Fraschilla should get on the board here pretty soon.
But Will Wade's been a popular name too. He obviously got ousted at LSU for recruiting stuff, and he got suspended and all that. At least it's not illegal stuff, so he can get another job. He's had a couple really, really good years at McNeese, which is why he's getting brought up in major searches again, because he's rebuilt his value. Ironically, oh no, I'm wrong. I thought he had coached Drake too. That was another guy that we can talk about. But no, so Will Wade, Fran Fraschilla, in Fran Fraschilla's opinion, Will Wade should be the first guy that Ren calls, which he might be. I don't know. Like I said, I think the other two,
second guy. Yeah,
I think the other two jumped to the top just because of their connections, and then Will Wade's going to be talked about in pretty much every high major job this cycle.
Yeah, but when you think about it, because we both know that Ren is not going to cling to only ties.
Yeah,
this cycle is a little different than last cycle, where it did appear last cycle that there was Dusty May and Darren DeVries. Dusty May 1, Darren DeVries 2, and everybody below them. Mm-hmm. And that West Virginia got the number 2 guy. That was why it was such a home run. They got the number 2 guy, and obviously Michigan has more money. They got the number 2 guy, and that was kind of the cycle. And Louisville had to tuck their tail between their legs. I mean, they got bottom of the barrel. They did not get what they wanted at that point, and we've seen Louisville, and now there are less programs that are likely going to be vying for these coaches. You could argue that whether they have ties or not, their resumes are more similar. So they're not as much of a Dusty May, Darren DeVries, everybody else. That you could argue that if any of these guys you mentioned are hired, that it's a good hire, a quote-unquote good hire. Because of that fact, does that lean you in any way to move into, okay, if you have a situation where you're looking at a Wade and Calhoun, that you then would sit down and say, okay, I like Wade a little bit better. Calhoun may be less likely to leave in a couple years. Like, does that go in your mind at all now if you're Ren Baker, or even if you're Cody Nesper doing this, that now is not so much 100% just getting the best guy you can, which is what the Darren DeVries hire was, but now, whether it's a tie or not, you have to make sure you get a guy that is committed to you as much as you're committed to him for more than a year. Because as I said, I think the number one goal, even above making the NCAA tournament next year, would be not doing this again. If they get in the tournament and then the guy wins a game and then they're doing this again, that is still a failure. They cannot be doing this again next spring.
Yeah. Certainly I think, and I think we're going to see it, whoever they hire when we get their contract, just like he did with Kellogg. I think we're going to see a massive buyout number in this new contract. And so, and you're right, I agree. I think the coaches I just named are very much on the same plane. I don't think one's, light years above any of the other ones. So at that point, if you're WVU and you have the best job, which they do, and you're going to be now the second domino to fall after Indiana, which I believe they will be. I think a lot of these coaches that are going to be in high demand are going to wait on an Iowa to see if they can get something better, because Iowa, like we outlined, isn't a destination this cycle.
I mean, the only thing is, unless they because the Drake coach could maybe maybe that there's the only chance that Iowa job moves quicker than West Virginia is in this regard, and it does not even make West Virginia look bad. Iowa
Yeah.
may know, oh wait, the national reporting is confirming the negativity. Oh man, we are a
Yeah.
worse job, so we're just gonna go get our guy. We're gonna call him home and say, hey, you're in the state, you're at Drake. If you want to come here, cool. And maybe if he says yes because it's a Power 4 job, then they get the guy, and that's it. If he says no, they're probably totally screwed. But maybe they move quicker because they don't have as many options.
Yeah. And so that's where you know, even if Iowa does sort of blitz and get McCollum like tomorrow, right? I still think, like we said, like I think Calhoun's right there with him. I think Wade's right there with him, just in
Right.
terms of like a hire this cycle. So I think it can come down to Ren negotiating with these guys' agents and getting a high buyout number, and or either a high percent or it's a big contract, and so the number's big. Just kind of like he did with Mark Kellogg. Like I said, he learned the lesson with Don P. They didn't get very much money from her. Kellogg's buyout is extremely prohibitive. That's why, despite the success, his name doesn't get tossed around. Um, and I imagine he's going to get an extension this year or next. And if he's serious about staying in West Virginia, which there's no reason to believe he isn't. And so
And
I
his
think,
name's not in as many rumors. He wasn't really in the Tennessee rumors. Like he's had success at now a power
yeah,
level and a mid-major level, and you don't really hear him being rumored. And it could very well be, Cody, that it's
yeah,
not that he is sucks. He obviously is a great coach. It could very well be that him and his agent are making it clear, I'm
yeah,
happy here.
yeah. And that's a big thing. Is like if you hear coaches' names in rumors, it's not on accident, right? Like
Who's
agents
putting
work
it
that
there? Right. The
exactly.
agents are putting
So
it there. The agents are
I
the one
mean,
leaking all of this. 100%. Yes.
if Kellogg was angling to get out, he would have been in the Tennessee rumors, and he'd be in the, I don't know,
Yep.
Stanford. Is that job coming open? I don't know.
Right.
He'd be in rumors like that. He hasn't. I don't think he's really been in any rumors since he's been here. And like I said, I if
No.
he wants to stay, which I think he does, I see an extension coming shortly. Um,
Like
but
Arizona State, and like there's a couple
yeah,
other jobs
that
that
was
are. I mean,
yeah,
you could argue West Virginia is kind of would be a lateral move, but maybe he would rather be out there. But he's not in those rumors. No, the
yeah,
coaches that are in those rumors are being elevated. Miller being one, the new diamond in the rough coach
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
Grand Canyon. So they're looking to elevate, kind of like what Kellogg was, from mid-major level up. There's not as much plucking going on in the women's game, but if Kellogg wanted another power job, you'd have to think Arizona State would rather have Kellogg than even Miller, even though she's the
Hmm.
diamond in the rough right now at Grand Canyon. He's proved it getting a top 6 seed at a power job. Maybe not. Maybe because she's already over there, then maybe they'd rather have her. But he's just not in the rumors, so you imagine he's going to stay. And
Yeah.
maybe also, maybe the situation too, if you're McCollum, maybe you're sitting there saying, I could go to the power job in the state I'm already in, and the buyout probably, when you think about it, I was not going to have this killer buyout that Ren's going to have to do.
Hmm.
They're going to basically say, they don't have the leverage. They're going to say, this is what we can offer. And if somebody counters too much, they're going to have to say, we can't do it. So they're not going to be able to say to somebody, we need a 50% buyout and basically screw you over if you leave. They're going to probably bend and give somebody a very favorable contract. So
Yeah.
he might be able to get a better contract there that would allow him to leave in a year. Whereas at West Virginia, that wouldn't happen. I do think Ren got to be tighter with this contract now for whoever he hires. But maybe it's a guy with ties, but it's not going to be about Huggins. It's not going to be John Beeline. And of course, it's not going to be Joe Mazzulla, who I have seen brought up a couple times. He's literally, as we're speaking, in the midst of potentially repeating as NBA champion and has a ring already. So this maybe is a little bit saner of a search too, Cody. If you recall, obviously at that point, that was before Mazzulla's NBA ring. That was when Huggins was still fresher in minds. Beeline was a year younger, and at the time he was putting tea leaves that he wanted to coach. Now he's okay with not. Maybe now this kind of takes people off the board that are just asinine, and we get a
Yeah.
good group of 3 or 4, and then Ren can decide between similar candidates and move on. But again, they can't, be doing this again next year. Cody Nesper, Mike Osta here, WV Sports Now, as we are reacting Darian DeVries leaving the Mountaineers for the Indiana job. Our coverage, of course, at WV Sports Now and Mountaineer Report available everywhere you get your podcasts and here in video form on YouTube. Thank you to everybody here in the chat for sure. I do see a lot of comments. We cleared up a lot of the Huggins conversation. I'm glad. I do see a lot of positive of In Men We Trust here, which I know some fans are now moving off that. I don't think any of this is Ren's fault. DeVries left for a blue blood. And then someone else we have not brought up that got to be mentioned that fans are talking about, Chester Frazier.
Yeah.
We talked off the air that he is that great recruiter. He's from the Big Ten. He won at Illinois, won big at Illinois in the Big Ten, comes aboard. He was that new coach for DeVries. They didn't really have a connection before, but now DeVries has worked with him. I'd imagine that either if I'm Chester Frazier, either I'm considered for this job or I'm probably going with DeVries to the blue blood, because where else would be better for me to go as an assistant? I already also know DeVries, and he is a great recruiter, and already seeing recruits leave might even signal that he's leaving, because recruits, they go for a head coach, but they also go for the assistant. So I'd imagine if he's not seriously being considered for the head job, he's definitely gone as well. What are your thoughts on Chester Frazier being the guy? Would you like that or not? And do you see that as something that Ren would seriously consider to avoid maybe losing him? Or is that not how Ren rolls?
I like Chester Frazier. I think he's a future head coach, and I think that future is sooner than later. I think you could make an argument. It wouldn't be a terrible hire. I don't think it would be a terrible hire. He was associate head coach this year, so obviously there's Darren thought highly of him, Ren thought highly of him to give him a title like that. If it's an internal promotion, that's really the one option where you could carry some of this momentum and keep the roster together a little bit, and maybe get the recruits signed back up and kind of keep this momentum going. Certainly, you think Amani Hansberry and Sincere Harris are going to go wherever he goes. They're his guys, really, more than they were Darren's and more than they are West Virginia's. But Chester, he's a guy I could very easily see getting any number of head coaching jobs this cycle. Certainly you imagine it would be mid-majors, if the places like West Virginia and Iowa pluck guys, he goes and fills one of those voids. Or if if Ren loves him, if he gets kind of a commitment from the players, I don't think it would be the worst hire to promote Chester Frazier. It's very un-Ren. Mike, you and I were talking. Ren often says he wants head coaches. He wants head coaching experience. He doesn't want to like
before.
He doesn't want to be trying guys out in a job like this for the first time. So I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it would be terrible. I think he's highly thought of. You mentioned it, Mike. He's got a great recruiting track record, and he's been around really, really successful teams. Like if you go through his resume, everywhere he's been has won and has gone to the tournament and been successful.
And he's a big part of it. He's a big part of it.
And like Illinois last year, he was a big part. Obviously, the team this year, he brought Amani and Sincere with him.
Yeah.
And you see him all over. Like when recruits post pictures, he's in them, right? Like you see him in timeouts and stuff. And so I don't hate it. I don't.
Hell, Iowa should call him. Iowa should say, "Hey, man,
honestly,
it's your first opportunity. I only got a couple $1 million. We're poor, but it's power basketball."
Honestly, I could see him getting, if it's what he wants, I could see him getting like a really good job, head coaching job, in this cycle if he's willing to wait it out, or if if like this is the time he wants to do it. There's dead end jobs that sometimes coaches go to just to get a start. I don't think he would have to do that just from his track record. And certainly you think he would be cheaper, right? Like he would probably be the cheapest option, which then, what do you do with that money? Do you spend it on the roster, right? NIL.
Well, that's the Rich Rod thing. Rich Rod is getting paid less than Neil Brown got paid, but he has more money for his staff. There's more of an NIL commitment, and he also was able to pluck big-time assistant coaches in Larry Porter and Zach Alley, who are both getting big money for assistants. So that's kind of the difference of the Rich Rod, Neil Brown staff. Neil Brown was getting all kinds of money, and everybody else was clearly below him. Whereas Rich Rod is making less than Neil Brown made with more accomplishments on his resume. And Zach Alley, Larry Porter, these are big swings. Now, they brought a lot of other guys that were connected to Rich Rod that are not getting paid tons of money, but he was able to give himself a Chester Frazier-like assistant. Same thing DeVries did. Whereas Neil Brown never had a Chester Frazier-like assistant because he was getting all the money. And I'm not saying I want to get in Neil Brown's pockets. You go get your money if you can get your money offered. But that is the difference. I mean, there was never a assistant coach on the Neil Brown staff. You could maybe argue Chad Scott, but he ascended to that. He wasn't hired to that. There was never any assistant that Neil Brown hired that immediately anyone nationally said, wow, what a hire. Rich Rod, to his credit, Cody, and we don't know how the team's going to play yet, but to his credit, he already had 2 hires so far that the national media said, I am surprised. These are really good. That never happened with Neil Brown in 6 years. And that did happen with DeVries immediately, with Chester Frazier being very praised. So maybe that is the ticket. Maybe Ren would sit down with somebody like he did with Rich Rod probably and say, look, I can give you this figure, and then this is what I want from the coaching staff, and this would be my expectations probably in year 1 or 2. Or I can give you this little lower figure, and then this is what you can give the coaching staff, and then this is my expectations. And it might be harder. I mean, it's the same thing. You hear what Josh Allen said? He didn't break the record for quarterback money displayed in the MVP. It's like, what's the difference of $5 million to me? I mean, there might be a coach who says, I'll take $500,000 less if you can give me the best assistant coach who's going to be the best recruiter in the world. Like that might be a thinking. So you just never know. I don't think Chester Frazier would be a bad hire. I think it'd be uncharacteristic of Ren. And I do also think the difference of this that would hurt Chester Frazier getting this job, even unlike football, I think Ren Baker in his mind is probably thinking what we're saying. I'm sure he's thinking, I don't want to do this every year. I'm sure he's annoyed by it. Honestly, Cody, if you read between some of the statements, I mean, just a day ago, he was talking about how much he loved DeVries and thank him for the job. It felt like in the statements, he was trying to send a message to DeVries, we want to keep you. In this statement, he made it clear we tried to keep him and he just said no. And it seems like Ren's a little pissed off, to be honest. And it might even be similar to, if you remember the Don P situation, he made it clear too. We tried to keep her and she said no. And it seemed like Ren was a little pissed off. So that is also the case here. But I think Ren's going to also in his mind think, okay, after I get over being pissed, this is the best job available in the country. I've never, out of all the searches he's had, he's never been the best job. He's been one of, he's never been the best job. He now probably, if he's competing with just Iowa, he can pick his coach. So he probably is thinking, Chester Frazier would be a good hire, but I have the best job and I'm going to give it to an assistant who's never been a head coach. I have the best job. Like, that's a different scenario. But the one thing I also will throw in there that is maybe a feather in the cap of Chester Frazier getting this job, and maybe is Chester Frazier more of a candidate than even we're saying because of this. We knew going into the football search that Ren Baker did not like assistants and wanted to have head coaching experience, regardless of what level. He preferred that than an assistant. I will tell you with absolute certainty, Ren Baker liked Andy Kotelnicki. He didn't hire him eventually, but he liked him a lot. He'll deny this, but he liked him a lot. And I will tell you, he offered him at one point, and so much so that Andy Kotelnicki, before the playoff, had to go on social media and say, I'm not going anywhere, because there was so much smoke there. He was a legit candidate. Andy Kotelnicki's never been a head coach. Andy Kotelnicki's been a hot assistant for a couple of years now, a hot coordinator. So that was uncharacteristic of Ren Baker. Now, he obviously liked Rich Rod more. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't like Rich Rod, but that was uncharacteristic of Ren Baker. So maybe Ren Baker is adjusting too. I mean, you could argue that Chester Frazier would be kind of the equivalent of what Andy Kotelnicki was. He's the hot assistant. He's around the same age, who is supposed to really be a sexy coach for a lot of the players, and the recruits would love him. He was willing to consider Andy Kotelnicki above Barry Odom, who was an established head coach. Ren liked Kotelnicki more than Barry Odom. I know that. Andy Kotelnicki was more of a candidate than Barry Odom ever was. So,
and Mike, you talked about reading between the lines of his statements. I think the statement today was really telling, and I'm going to read a couple lines from it.
Yeah, go ahead.
From Ren Baker. Coach and I had several conversations in recent weeks focused on working together to build a strong foundation to continue to grow the program. I made it clear to him that WVU is committed to invest in him and provide the resources needed to compete in the Big 12 nationally. That's read between those two lines, and that's I offered him an extension.
Yeah.
I offered him an extension, and he turned it down. Don't blame me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was very telling that Ren included that. I mean, very obviously purposefully.
Yeah.
Obviously as a
Yeah.
signal to the fan base, like this isn't what I wanted. We
I think he's
tried.
given like I hear you. Like
Yeah.
I'm more logical than you. Maybe I'm not a fanatic. I'm an administrator, but I hear you. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this shit
Well,
too.
and then
I think everybody is. I think
he
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 hears
doesn't
them.
he doesn't go on talk line last night and say what he
Yeah.
said if he wasn't feeling a certain way.
You know what it
Um,
could have been? And I agree that he's pissed, and I agree. There's a chance, and this again is why the internet has been wrong for a year. I do think this scenario occurred. He thought, okay, if I'm competing against Iowa and some of these fake
yeah.
rumors, maybe they get legit because their job opens. Cody, anything that I know about the value of the job or what money's out there, Ren Baker knows that and then some. Obviously, we're not naive to that. Ren Baker can evaluate the job better than anybody in the world. I'm sure the entire year he was probably laughing, thinking, Iowa, really? Iowa. Okay. Like, are you serious? Like
Yeah.
and I'm sure he probably, when he went on Sportsline, he probably had a confirmation because that was even before the official that he turned down Iowa, but he probably knew, okay, he said no to Iowa. We're going to give him this extension. He probably knows, even telling to the fans a signal there on the lines you read that, hey, fans, the reports of what we already spent on DeVries, it can be more. We were
Mhm.
going to extend him. We have more. I think that's also what he's trying to convey as well. But he probably was confident, okay, Iowa's a joke in this, in all intents and purposes. And then maybe Indiana was more of a quick thing. They weren't in rumors 6 months ago. Maybe Indiana was okay. Now the coaching job is open. That's a blue blood. And maybe that did move quicker. Maybe Ren did not really think Indiana was going to take DeVries. Maybe DeVries led him astray. Maybe he thought it was just Iowa. Maybe Ren was naive. I mean, you could argue that maybe that was naive because the Indiana job has been a job that's been floundering for a while. People have wanted Woodson out of there for a while. Maybe Ren should have been more aware of what Indiana was doing. But I think the Sportsline appearance might have been a little bit of, I was a joke here. Maybe he thought
Yeah.
DeVries was coming back, and maybe Indiana did move really, really quick into this. Because I don't think, again, I always thought that DeVries was never going to Iowa, but Indiana could be a job that he certainly would take even after 1 year. But when you hear what Ren had to say, I did think, okay, maybe this isn't happening. I mean, Ren doesn't say things just to look stupid, but
Yeah.
I do think that I love Ren as an AD, but to be fair to this, and Ren has dealt with a lot, and most of his decisions have been good. I think he looks a little bad in this. And again,
Yeah.
I think he did not make the buyout hard enough to get out for the big time jobs. He only made it hard for the lateral moves. You need to look above. Because if you think your coach is going to have instant success, DeVries' value went from here with WVU and in 1 year went to here. So you got to make sure you're progressive in what you think the contract will be. And maybe he spoke out of turn.
Yeah.
Like you can't
Well,
speak that strongly and then dismiss a blue blood.
Yeah. Something I didn't bring up, which is kind of like morbidly funny, is Darren had an automatic extension clause in his contract where
Right.
I think if they had finished top 6 in the Big 12, it would have kicked it and added a year,
Sure.
thus increasing his buyout. Which that is kind of protection of like, hey, if you come in and you're awesome right away and people are going to want to
That
poach
kind
you,
of is.
this does bump the buyout up, another million or so.
It would look like they were going to do that for a while until they puttered the
and
season away. But
it's a little goofy. They finish 8th, so that doesn't
Right.
happen. So it's easier to poach him, and the year was good enough that somebody wanted to poach him. So that it is like the contract did have that protection in, and it's goofy that it like threaded the needle of like just good enough that somebody wanted him, but not good enough that it kicked in and W got a little bit more money. The stuff about
Yeah.
somebody asked in the chat, the stuff about the fake a shoulder injury
I was going to
and
go there
this
because
was
people
in
were
the
talking
work
about
for
it.
like guys,
Yeah.
come on, that's
Yeah.
and somebody said like, oh, this he's been agreed to this ever since Woodson stepped down. Athletic departments are not ironclad. Stuff leaks constantly. And like little stuff too. There's no way, even if it was Indiana's AD, Darren's agent, and Darren are the only souls on earth that know about it, it would still get leaked. Stuff like that doesn't stay under wraps
Agents
for 5
love
months.
talking to media. Agents
Oh,
every time. This is what a tip for any of
and
the
then
fans.
yeah.
Anytime a national media member breaks, here's the thing, and this is true. Anytime a national media member breaks news above a local media member, the agent leaking it to him.
Yes,
100%.
yes.
Every time. Every single freaking time.
Everything
time.
everything Pete Thamel tweets out is from an agent.
100%.
People
Every
don't
time.
like. People don't.
100%.
I don't know. Understand that. I guess. So it's impossible that this was agreed upon in February. Like,
And that's where
said.
the agent wants it broken. The agent thinks it looks better when Pete Thamel breaks it than Mike Osti. 100%. And it's always from the agent.
And if this had been agreed to, Darren's agent would have been working every phone to get him in every rumor to just drive the price up.
Yep.
Which he wasn't doing, right? It seems like he was unwillingly in that Iowa rumor from Iowa.
Yeah.
It seems like that originated from Iowa's side.
Yeah.
And obviously he didn't want that job.
And some WVU fans, oddly enough, but yeah, I mean, there was a whole contingent of a lot of WVU people that were trying to push.
I gotta say, based on the Iowa fans that interacted with me on Twitter, I don't feel bad for them because they were very, very rude.
They are a delusional rude. They are a delusional group of people, man. They are a delusional group of people. Like, I swear to God, they are out of their freaking minds.
I'm gonna a little small tangent. I saw this new narrative from Iowa fans that this was Darren's dream job. He turned down his dream job. He's never said. Nobody has ever said that. You made that up. And it's so
I mean, aside from being from there, they're just assuming that. And as I said repeatedly, even if it that's why I wrote a whole article that's the only reason this man would go there, because there was absolutely nothing else that said that is a better job. I gave you like a chapter and verse. There was nothing else there. I kind of wasted my time. I went 2,000 words deep here, and 2 days later he's gone somewhere else. But I just was so annoyed with social media. Like there was nothing here. And I think that rumor exposed who really knows what they're talking about, whether it be fan or wannabe media, burner account, legit fan, or wannabe media. That exposed who really knows what they're talking about. It 100% does, because I would even get comments there, Mike, this is a big, Big Ten world. What are you talking about? It's biased reporting. It's like, yes, the Big Ten TV contract is absolutely better. I understand. But I need you to dig into what's going on at Iowa, man, because they don't know what they're doing over there. And it does not mean that every single school in the conference is just operating smooth sailing. I mean, half of it was public knowledge. I mean, their AD confirmed that they're dipping into talk. I mean, what are we doing? If I am Darren DeVries, as I said, if my dream job becomes available, and then I hear from that dream job that they are doing everything wrong under the sun. They're mismanaging everything possible. And I could make an argument, Cody, I don't even know this to be true, but doesn't dipping in your own pocket to uphold any, I mean, we got a violation somewhere in there that we got to be, reporting. Like, there got to be something that I feel like, you take the job and they're all of a sudden suspended for multiple years. Like, that doesn't. They looking for an AD. They have a new AD in place now who took over after a year. She didn't do most of the damage, but she's now there. And they're also still looking for, like, they obviously don't want her permanently. It is a cluster F. Like, I don't know what, like, that would be, I said it and I feel comfortable in saying, and I would have said Darren's face, you want that job because it's a dream job? That is a dumb professional move, sir. And he clearly agreed. Agreed. And it almost felt like, as you're saying, they tried to ignore it for so long. And then he was like, he basically told Thamel pretty much, dude, I was, let it be known that that's, ridiculous. So can we get it out there? Because when often does Thamel doesn't even make a living off debunking reports. He usually ignores, and then here's the breaking news. He literally, before DeVries goes to Indiana, had to break news. DeVries is not going to Iowa, guys. Like, leave it alone. So Yeah.
I really liked, somebody tweeted at you a couple days ago. They were like, when you were talking about this Iowa stuff, they were like, do you think coaches do financial checks on institutions? Yes, they do. Of course they do. They're not going somewhere with no money.
Unless they're dumb, like
I mean,
unless they're just
you think
stupid.
coaches check how much money? Yes, if they're signing massive contracts. Come on.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah, so
I mean that was no the Iowa fans. I'm happy to leave them
yes,
have them
yeah.
leave my life
Like I
because I mean
said, I don't.
they were also trying to they were people trying to spin some wizardry that somehow Iowa's a better job in the last 40 years because the 80s were better collectively than what the last 25 years have done. They haven't been to Sweet 16 since 1999. We're in 2025. Yeah, they have one more Final Four, but they have if you're going to evaluate the history of a program, Cody, would you not look at tournament appearances, tournament victories, Sweet 16s, Elite
Mhm,
Eights? W has more of all of those. They have
mhm.
one less Final Four, but by the way, they're all clumped together in this small chunk of time. And then after we finally got to the end of that thread with those fans, then one tried to tell me, oh, well, let's go from 1980 on. Well, the reason why you're going from 1980 on and not from 1990 or 2000 is because the 80s is the only decade that you got the advantage. If we take away the 80s, it is just, W all day. So this is not Iowa football we're talking about here. Like the Iowa fans are delusional. It almost seems like they don't know what's going on at their program, to be honest, because at least I'll give West Virginia fans credit. They have more of an awareness of what's happening. The Iowa fans seem like they have no idea what is going on. And again, I think they would rather have had Darian say no to them and stay than go to their rival, like who's clearly a better program. This is just, I love for Iowa sports now to be hearing what they're saying because that we got to expand just to be able to hear their coverage. It's just insane. Like and I thought you were going to go in this direction too because you've had your war with the WU burners over the years. This is another example again of not only exposing who's tapped in, but what
Yeah,
the fans should be looking at. Like
yeah.
every single time there is something online that seemingly looks like news, you got to look into it before you're just believing
Mhm.
it. There have been reports for months that he was locked into Iowa, and there are people now today who are now trying to backpedal and claim, "Oh, I never said that," because you deleted your tweets. This includes some wannabe media who deleted their tweets that all said that that he was locked into
Yeah,
Iowa. And this is the issue. There's no accountability when you have a fake account and when you have a burner. You can say whatever, delete a tweet, deny, deny, deny. And then if you're right, great. But I can give you a chapter and verse on everything they've been wrong over the years. I mean, if
yeah.
we go back, Neil Brown should be at Virginia Tech right now. Aubie Burke shouldn't have finished at WVU. Barry Odom should be West Virginia's head coach currently. Darren DeVries should be at Iowa. The list can go on and on and on. And during the entire year of every one of those stories that ended up being wrong, people were believing it and literally citing stupid burner accounts. And then you also get some media members who are not credentialed trying to cite burner accounts, thinking they're stooping us, and they just look stupid because they end up wrong every freaking time.
That's
But people keep buying into it every year.
yeah,
I'm sure the new coach, we're going to get a rumor, and fans are going to say, "Mike, what
yeah.
about this? If it's from a burner, if it's from where, it's not true." Like we
That's
shouldn't have to go
I
through this anymore.
I always tell people, like, you just got to think about this. The biggest news of the season or off season is not going to come from a nameless, faceless account, right? Like it doesn't make sense to me that people see, Deuce McBride truther tweet something and they're like, oh my god, right? Like people, like that's what I don't understand. Or Iowa. What was
Yeah,
it? Iowa Burner Network today said
Iowa
Aaron was in
burners
Iowa City,
are something. They might be worse than West
but
Virginia's burners. That burner
but
community is something else. Yeah,
like I don't. People just need to understand. A nameless, faceless account is not breaking the biggest news of the offseason. A nameless, faceless account is not breaking
right.
who this new coach is. Who's going to break it? It's going to be Mike Kazaza, you, Mike, me, if God smiles upon me, Keenan
Right.
Cummings. Like it's going to be
Yeah.
the people you expect. The actual working journalists, and that's what people like. I don't know. They want to get excited, so they see stuff and they let themselves think it's true, but they don't think critically about where it's from, or hey, who Mike Casazzo breaks everything, right? What are the odds he doesn't break the new coach? 10%, somebody else has it. Like, it's not going to be a burner. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of us, or it's the national media,
or the national media.
Yeah, and that's generally every time there's news that ends up being correct. That's who breaks the news. That list. Every time there's news that ends up being wrong, that list is not breaking the news. And
yes.
Normally, there's numerous times where you get something that looks like crazy breaking news, and I'll get a text, Mike, why aren't you on this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because this is literally not true. Why would I be on this? I got enough of things going on. I'm not going to be on something that is not that is inaccurate. And actually, you could argue, and maybe I ended up being on the DeVries to Iowa too much because I had to write a whole article on how it was not true and how this is just stupid. But I did that, and a lot of people read it, but it did very well. But it was just because of this. Like we got to be at a point now that there's enough coaching searches, there's enough news that West Virginia fans have experienced in this era that they're, and I'm not even saying these are not all just stupid people out there. There are intelligent friends of ours that are out there being like, Mike, what why aren't you on this random burner account breaking the news? Like, just think about it for 2 minutes before you send in the text. Like, it doesn't if something doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Because if you critically think and be like, okay, dream job, oh wait, this national media member says they're horrible with money, but burner account said it's the dream job.
Yeah.
Where am I going? Like, what are we doing? But anything else on this? At least on the initial reaction of where you think this is going to go, do you have it? There are some. Pete Thamel did say he thinks it's going to be very, very quick in comparison. We know Ren to be a very long searcher. How do you think this is going to move? Do you want to throw a hot take or any prediction out there? Anything else on this right now?
I could see this wrapping up, before the tournament's over, like, before the Elite Eight even. And you and I kind of joked earlier, like a lot of these guys Ren probably interviewed last year, right? So it's not going to be a ton of new homework, right? I'm sure he has last year's notes to crack open and be like, oh, here's Will Wade's dossier, right? Like, so I could easily see this, wrapping up in the next 2 weeks, wrapping up before the Elite Eight. If we're into like the end of April and there's no coach, something's probably gone wrong. it's like something's probably not worked out. But I know I absolutely could see a quick timeline on this.
Yeah, and he might again, I don't think, because people will freak out here, so I'm going to say this now. I do not think, again, if Iowa hires someone first, I do not think that means the Iowa job is better. I think there's a chance that Ren is so confident that he has the better job than Iowa that he will let them do whatever the hell they want to do. And if a coach accepts their offer, he's not going to lose any sleep because they probably are only accepting the Iowa offer if they know West Virginia is not going to take them. I cannot imagine a scenario where a coach is going to prefer Iowa over WU. The only way would be if Iowa is giving him a better situation contractually and even buyout wise, where they basically can just own Iowa. Whereas DeVries has now made Ren Baker probably very strict on what he will give buyout wise. And those are things to watch for, to look to see actually what the buyout is. If it's a 37.5%er again, and you got to be, top six, all that bullshit, then Ren is great in press conferences, but I'm going to need an answer there. Like, he cannot have it pulled over him again in this buyout. I wouldn't even be shocked, Cody, because normally, we know how the process works. Normally it goes, you get this, you get the announcement, you get a confirmation, you get a statement. We're going to get an email. It'll be a Ren Baker press conference in a couple days. He'll go dark. He'll tell her, he's going to know everybody, make a joke. Don't text me. Wife's going to be upset. All these things. He'll then, go on his search, etc. We won't hear anything for a while. We'll all be reporting. You should be looking for, even to my competitors, you should be looking for Mike Kazaza, Keenan Cummings, or myself. I really feel like that's where you should be looking, but people will look elsewhere. And then, it'll be a cluster F, maybe not as much this time. And then a month later, you get some small, more news. Like, at that point, people like myself and Keenan and Michael start reporting things more seriously, national media will then jump on board. They usually don't do it as much during the whole process because they have other teams to worry about. And then you get the announcement and another presser. Wouldn't be shocked in this, Cody, if we don't even get the pre-search presser. I wouldn't be shocked if Ren just is like, okay, here's a statement. I got nothing else to say. I'm going to do a search right now. We want to do this quick. I mean, we're cutting that timeline Mike just gave you in half, and it's going to be me search, some reporting, me doing the news. We got an announcement. We got a presser. You're the coach. And before the end of this damn tournament, you got to recruit this next season. Like, I don't think we're going to do what he's been doing. I think this might be a little different, Ren Baker, because I do think admittedly he's pissed. I don't think he wants to be doing this right now as much as he likes searches. So I think this might be a little different Ren Baker than he was in the basketball football search. I mean, football, he really took his time. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a within 2 week situation.
Yeah. And another thing, like I honestly don't think we're going to get a press conference because
what's the point of it? I don't even want it.
Well, one, like, what's he going to say? And then two, like, he's cognizant that the women play on Saturday.
Oh, that's fair.
Right. Yeah. Like, so I don't think he's going to just bulldoze the fact they're in the tournament. And like you and I talked about a couple.
Well, it's been happening. They've been bulldozing him anyway, but
they've got a really good shot to make a run here. Like, so if we don't get a presser this week, honestly, I would be more surprised if we get a Ren Baker presser this week.
Yeah, I would be surprised. And I'll tell you right now, because he probably is going to go. I would think maybe not because of the search. If there was no search, he probably would be going to. He would probably go with the women. He might not be able to do that now, but maybe he still would.
He might show up on Saturday. Like, that wouldn't shock me.
You know what? Maybe we should close this way. And I don't know whether he's going to be there on Saturday or not. I'm not going to pretend we're close like that. If Ren Baker is in attendance on Saturday, Cody, then he's a real confident guy that he knows he's running the search. Like, if he's there with the women, then he is absolutely sitting there saying, I was a joke. There's no other job open. He already got confirmation probably from Pitt that they're definitely not firing Capel, which looks like definitely isn't happening. And he's going to just chill and be like, I got 4 guys. I'm going to have my pick. And I'm going to make this buyout a real MFer to try to get out of. Like, and I you could argue now that even though that would suck for the coach, there are about 4 or 5 guys who want a head coach job. I bet you they all want the WVU job. So they might eventually have to go to their agent and be like, am I taking a job I don't want with an easier ability to get out of the contract, or a job I want and I'm going to have to get screwed because it's freaking Darren DeVries? But you got to then pick what you want. And I do think there's clear proof that you can win right away. And, yes, you can't continuously miss the tournament at a school like West Virginia. The expectations are to at least make the tournament. And this should have been a tournament appearance, but it was not factually. But you can, blame Bo Cunningham for that. But that's just where it is. And I do think Ren Baker is in a good spot. I do think he's annoyed. He's annoyed. Everybody's freaking annoyed. And I do think maybe everyone could realize that once we get an announcement here. I do think this should be quicker. If there's going to be a presser, we got to get this email, by like real early tomorrow morning.
It would be
maybe
tomorrow
already
if they're going to do one.
I could argue we should have got it already. Because we should be getting this presser by Thursday at like the latest. And, they may freaking do it because they think that's respectable to the fans. Because they might think, okay, we can't guarantee the fans are consuming, who they should be in Kazaza, Keenan, and myself. So we're going to do this presser. But any advisement that they want to hear from me, obviously they're not going to, I'm not an advisor there, but, every now and then might get asked some things. I would recommend not doing it. I don't think there's anything. I think there's a chance fans might even get more pissed. Like, because there's things he got to ask. I don't think he looks great in this. And, if he answers some questions and it totally sounds like DeVries just ran over his ass, I don't think that's going to look good for the. Just don't do it. Just leave it alone. Take the L and then move on. And maybe you do end up with a better coach. And maybe DeVries is fired in 2 years and it looks like he made a bad decision. That could friggin' happen. I mean, it looks like Dawn P's in a worse spot than where WVU is right now. So WVU kind of won that, and she handled that horrendously and tried to screw him. So go WV Sports now, of course, for all of our coverage of this search. That it will definitely be there. We will still be covering the women's in the tournament. We will still be covering football when they get back at it. Baseball is playing, and God bless them. They keep trying to win big games, literally in the midst of breaking news, and got it up on the site, but we're literally covering the baseball program more than anybody else because half people are just not even putting the recaps up now because, like, what are you going to do? It's midnight and, we got breaking news again with the basketball program. So, apologies to Steve Sabins. Maybe they eventually get the limelight there. But a lot going on around Mountaineer athletics, to say the least. But Darian DeVries is now a Hoosier. So, good luck to him. I do think it does definitely suck, but it can be okay for the program. And I don't, you need to watch out who you believe and what you believe throughout a year when you're trying to consume content. If you're a fan and trying to consume news and really want to be tapped in, and as much as I get how bad I do, the one thing I do get of the fans, I'm not, I do understand the fans in this regard, Cody. And I said this on a bunch of shows ago, and I know you rolled your eyes when I said it at the time, and may still now. And I don't believe this conspiracy, but the only conspiracy I do get a little bit, at least I understand where they're coming from. Darren DeVries refusing to talk about his son for months, who then doesn't plays only to the bar of being able, right at the bar of being able to get back there next year and apply for the extra eligibility, and then leaves, taking his son with him. It doesn't look good. I mean, I'm not saying that in January he's sitting there saying we're going to go to Indiana, because at the time he might have thought it was only Iowa, and that he told Tucker not to play or any of that, because that just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't even be good for the kid. But I could see the fans being pissed. That part of it, I think it looks shitty. It really does. Like that just looks ridiculous. And I think at least if Darren was more honest, and it would at least there were press conferences where, quite frankly, it looked like you were even getting dirty looks from the program if you tried to flirt with asking a Tucker question. It was pretty much known. Like, he pretty much, I don't want any more Tucker questions. And if it wasn't for like Herzl, and I asked a couple, like Herzl just doesn't care, so he would ask, and more power to him. But that just looks bad when you get this result. You get this result, that looks bad.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, it does look bad. And there is a situation where I believe West Virginia has to apply for Tucker's medical red shirt, and then West Virginia has to release him once they get it, which can get ugly. You might remember better than me, Mike. That happened at Pitt a few years ago when Kevin Stallings was there. Somebody wanted to go to North Carolina, and it was like a mess. I forget, Cam Johnson, was that the guy's name?
Yeah, he did go to. He went to North Carolina.
Eventually, but I remember it was a big fight. Pitt wouldn't release him.
Yeah, he's in the NBA now. Obviously, I mean, he was from Pittsburgh, played at Olsh, and then he went to North Carolina. That was a big thing. Yeah.
So like this, there could be
they could play dirty, man,
and on the horizon.
Hey, if you read that statement
like that, yeah.
I don't think WVU would do it, because I think it would hurt them, and I think their main focus is helping them, and I think that would hurt them in future recruiting, because I think kids would be like, you're screwing over, this NBA prospect. I don't know if I'm going to come there. I don't think they want to do that. You have to think of it. It's not just, fans will say, I want to do that, kill them, but it would hurt the program in future recruiting. However, if you read the statement and you believe that Indiana was kind of late in the game here, and that you and DeVries were always talking about Iowa, and you went on Sportsline and were so strong, and the statement just a day ago was about how much you liked DeVries, and then you get this statement, it's pretty clear Wren's mad. So if Darren and Indiana make this in any slightest more difficult than it currently is, I wouldn't be shocked if he at least threatens it, because I think eventually Wren has to think to himself, I have to send a message to the country. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be anyone's bitch, basically, for lack of a better. And we're on the internet, so I can say that here. I think that has to be in his mind at some point here. I think he has to start thinking that way. Like, if we're going to have a bad year, I'm at least making a message that, this is not going to be a thing we're doing every year. And if that's the plan for coaches around the country, then here's a message not to do it. I mean, And again, I cannot imagine that Darian would have, because if they had Tucker DeVries in more games, they're likely in the tournament. Let's be honest.
Well, and then
so he wouldn't have hurt his own team to not get in.
Yeah.
He would really be killing Javon Small if he did that. That's a really crazy conspiracy. And if you're Javon Small, you should be really, really mad about it. But it looks really, really bad. So I do get that from the fans. I do.
Well, and it doesn't make sense because if you hold Tucker out, how do you know you're going to be good enough the rest of the season that another team wants you? So it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. Like, you're right. It doesn't look bad. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't not look bad. It looks bad.
I'm just saying.
But it doesn't. The timeline doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, I agree. But I'm just saying, you rolled your eyes at me when I brought it up. I gave you a conspiracy. I was like, if we get this out of this, it's going to look bad. And you were like, no, we're not going to get that. And I'm like, here we are. And this will be the perfect way to close it. Well, I think I need fans to remember, especially the older fans. And this was before your time, but this was, I do remember, this was when I was a student, actually. Bob Huggins left a school that he turned around and had a great run with, and they felt like they kind of got snubbed, and he was loving it there, and they loved him. Kansas State, who helped his career when he kind of ruined it the first time with what happened at Cincinnati, and he left them in the dust, screwed him over after 1 year. He did go home, but he went to what he thought was a better job, also a power job. Kansas State was not a mid-major. That was a power job at the time. So that is, Indiana's doing to West Virginia what West Virginia did to Kansas State 20 years ago. That is true. That is, fans, there was not one West Virginia fan at that time that felt bad for Kansas State or gave a damn about Kansas State or any of that. And the same people now, because I even see some that are old enough that are my age that will remember that are now irate about this. It's very similar. Now, you could argue it would have been more similar if DeVries would have went to Iowa, but Indiana's a better job. But it's 1 year, and it happened in West Virginia's favor before. And then, Cody, 3 years after that, West Virginia's in the Final Four. Where's Kansas State? It hurt Kansas State's. He hurt Kansas State's program. Didn't give a damn because he wanted to help himself. And that's the way of the world, and it helped West Virginia at that time. But Indiana's worrying about Indiana, and DeVries is worrying about DeVries. So it's time for Ren Baker to worry about West Virginia and to worry about Ren Baker. And that's currently where you are. Again, WV Sports Now for the rest of our coverage. Mountaineer Report, where you can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. And to say there's going to be more on this would be an understatement. So, yes, expect more on this in the days and weeks, and I really hope not months.